Greetings and welcome to the weekend worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. I'm the Reverend Monica Dobbins. I'm the assistant minister of this church, and it is my honor to welcome you today. If you are joining us for the first time, please visit our website, slcuu.org, or visit our social media channels to learn more about our church and discover all the exciting things that we are doing. Though our church building is closed right now, our church is active in our community and committed to living our values and seeking justice together. I'd like to take a moment now to thank you, all of those of you who attended our online auction this weekend. We had a great time, and I'm so grateful to all of you for showing up to support our church. Congratulations to this year's Fairly Free Thinker Award winner, Lex Scott, the leader and organizer of Black Lives Matter Utah. I'm also especially grateful to our auction committee. Each one of you deserves our praise and gratitude for your hard work and commitment to our congregation. I don't know about you, but I'm already looking forward to next year's auction. And now, let us begin our service by lighting the chalice, the sacred flame that represents our faith wherever UUs are gathered around the world. Today, we light it with these words by the Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper. I do not wish to breathe another breath if it is not shared with others. The breath of life is not mine alone. I brought myself to be with you, hoping that by inhaling the compassion, the courage, the hope found here, I can exhale the fear, the selfishness, the separateness I keep so close to my skin. I cannot live another moment, at least not one of joy, unless you and I find our oneness somewhere among each other, somewhere between the noise, somewhere within the silence of the next breath.
Today's Time for All Ages is an African creation myth, The Golden Chain, rewritten by Erica Shadowsong. Long ago, before there were any people, all life existed in the sky. Olorun lived in the sky, and with Olorun there were many Orishas. They lived by the young baobab tree, where they found everything they ever needed for food, work, or play. In fact, they were all very creative and made things all the time, clothing themselves in beautiful robes and skirts and gold jewelry. Now, Olorun had told them that all the vast skies was theirs to explore, but all of the Orishas seemed happy to stay near the baobab tree, except for Obatala. Obatala was the curious Orisha who wasn't content to live blissfully by the baobab tree. Like all Orishas, he had certain powers, and he wanted to put them to good use. As he pondered what to do, he looked far down through the mist below the sky. As he looked and looked, he began to realize that there was a vast empty ocean below the mist. Obatala went to Olorun and said, I want to go down from the heavens to the dark seas below and make something, maybe beings like you did, so I can share with them my knowledge and teach them. Now, Olorun, who had himself been made by Olodumare, the mysterious god beyond all things, understood Obatala's desire to create and was more than willing to say yes. I suggest you talk to Orunmila, he advised. He can see far into the future about how things will go. And if anyone knows the magic that you will need to do this, it's him. So Obatala consulted Orunmila from the far sight. Orunmila cast his seeds into a tray and frowned, looking at them thoughtfully. Finally, he said that Obatala would need, among other things, 3 important things to take with him: a snail shell filled with powder made from the baobab tree, some palm kernels, and the sacred golden egg that contained all the spirits of the Orishas. You will also need a way to get down. Go to the goldsmith and ask him to make you a chain that reaches down to the world below. Even though Obatala did not know what everything was for, he did exactly as he was told. First, he went to the other Orishas and asked them for all of the gold they had, which they gave him willingly. Then he took it to the goldsmith and said, "Make me a gold chain that drops down into the world below so that I can climb safely down." He dressed in clean white robes, packed his belongings, the snail shell with the tree powder, the palm seeds, and last he removed the sacred egg from the tree and held it carefully clutched to his chest. Then Obatala began to climb down the golden chain, down in the dark swirling waters. He climbed for 7 days as the dark waters got closer and closer. On the last day, when he got to the end of the chain, he found that it was too short. Obatala hung there, swinging gently on the golden chain from heaven, wondering what to do. Then Orunmila, who was watching, called to him from above, "Use the shell, Obatala!" And he remembered that the snail shell and pulled it out of his pack. But he was carrying so many things as he balanced in the air that as he did, the powder from the snail shell spilled out into the water. As the sand hit the waters, it formed masses of solid land, mountains and islands and plains. And as he watched, he did not notice how tightly he was holding the egg until suddenly it cracked against his chest. Out of the egg flew the Sankofa, the great golden bird who was always looking behind itself into the past to carry its wisdom into the present. And the bird came with the spirits of all the Orishas in a crowd of colors carrying tools, musical instruments, machetes, and crossbows, for they all had their own powers and knowledge. They were hunters and fighters and dancers and diviners, and they brought the powers of nature and the elements as they explored this new world, and they each found a home where they were most comfortable. When all of the Orishas had been released into the world, Obatala himself got to work. He dropped from the golden chain onto the ground and took a walk, dropping the palm nuts into the ground. Giant trees burst forth and grew with great speed as he hummed and walked along. Then he sat down and began to mold shapes in the sand and water until he had made many, many beings that looked a little bit like him and the other Orishas. Olorun happened to look down from the skies as Obatala finished the people, and seeing that they were not alive yet, he took a deep breath and breathed their spirits into them. Obatala was so happy, but he began to notice that something was wrong. The bodies were all different. They were not perfect. And the way they talked and behaved toward each other was sometimes strange and unkind. Then he remembered. During his crafting, he'd gotten thirsty and taken some of the juice from the palm trees. But the juice had been fermented into wine, and it made him a bit tipsy. He felt horrible. Obatala sat down and groaned into the earth. "I've been careless," he cried to himself. "And now the people will suffer because I was not paying attention to how I made them." Now the other Orishas had heard their brother groaning in pain, and from the forests and the streams and the oceans and the forge they spoke. "Obatala," they said, "didn't you create these beings so you could share your wisdom in the first place? What does it matter that they aren't perfect? Now, not only you are here, but so are we. And we swear to you that we will also bring our gifts to help them. We will teach them with all the things we know, how to take care of themselves, protect each other, and love each other as a great family, as we were. Wherever they go and whatever happens to them, we promise to you that as long as your world exists, they will find us in it." Obatala smiled as he listened to his brothers and sisters, comforted. For now he knew that whenever his people found trouble, they would have help to see them through it.
Well, greetings to all, and thank you for joining our worship service today. It's wonderful to at least be together in spirit. In the early morning following the presidential debate, I headed to a corner of my house which has about, roughly 50 or so books on Eastern spirituality. I didn't sleep well that night after witnessing a kind of brokenness. I can't think of any other word, but brokenness in our country that I had never experienced before. As we watched an unbearable exchange of screaming insults between two men vying to be leaders of our country, leaders of the free world, we couldn't help but observe that wisdom does not come with age automatically. It was as if, you had two men together, 152 years combined, and there was no wisdom to be found anywhere. So early the next morning, I grabbed Pema Chodron, a classic book of hers called When Things Fall Apart. Her gentle approach felt like balm for the soul, helping us cope with the grim realities we're forced to confront as is inevitable as human beings. It's not always a smooth ride. But she says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid when experiencing a painful situation. In fact, she reminds us, we must move forward towards it with courage and friendliness. Well, I thought that was an odd word, friendliness, and I kind of sat on that for a little bit. But it really is the right word, because it is in the midst of chaos that we can discover that truth and love are simply indestructible. Wow. The foolishness of what was called the presidential debates, the utter chaos of lies, deceit, delusions, could not shake the foundations upon which truth and love ultimately rest. We cannot forget this very simple lesson, and I can approach that situation with friendliness, knowing that truth and love will always be there. They're stable parts of the universe. And then I grabbed, well, an old standby, Jack Kornfield's The Wise Heart. The heading of one chapter in their book made me laugh. It was called A Life of Balance, Turn Off the News. Now he tells me. Kornfield connects wisdom with quieting the mind. So think about it. If our actions arise from anger, grasping, aggression, they will only perpetuate the problem. So simple, yet so profound. The anger and aggression dripping from the debate last Tuesday night only perpetuated the problems that haunt our nation. Kornfield cited two great leaders and offers their examples. First, we need to know that the ultimate primary guiding principle for Gandhi was the interdependence of all of life. People, plants, animals, trees, soil, all so interdependent. No thing is separate from another. No matter how pressing and urgent a political situation may be, the day that Gandhi spent in silence allowed him to quiet his mind and listen to the purest intentions of his heart. In other words, that's the time when he was able to reflect on the principles that guide him, the interdependence of all of life. So yes, turning off the news helps you regain a sense of life's balance. And the second example that Kornfield cites is Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh is really big on this inner quiet. Well, we can assume that. It's so much part of the Buddhist tradition. But Thich Nhat Hanh says it is the inner quiet that serves our political lives. Thich Nhat Hanh reminded us that when the crowded refugee boats full of families fleeing from Vietnam met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But even if just one person on that boat stayed calm, just one person, that would be enough. It would show the way for everyone to survive. So here's the prescription right from Thich Nhat Hanh. Quieting the mind is a political act. Think about that. Quieting the mind is a political act. Use courage and compassion to respond calmly with both prudent action and a fearless heart. So going forward, may we quiet our minds and regain a life balance, and then face the painful situations at hand with courage and calm. Face the painful situations with prudent actions and a fearless heart. Amen.
One of my favorite parts of my job is welcoming visitors and friends, new members and curious folks to our chapel, whether in person or virtually. I love to tell people about Unitarian Universalism, about this free and responsible faith that I serve and live by, and what's so great about it. I know many of you do too. And what I hear from a lot of folks is that your favorite tool for evangelism is the rainbow bookmark. Isn't this great? It's practical, it's beautiful, and it's got our 7 principles and our 6 sources right here. So if anybody ever asks you, what the heck is Unitarian Universalism? You've got a ready-made elevator speech right here in your pocket or tucked inside a book. Now, as much as I love the rainbow bookmark, I can't use it anymore. And maybe by the time this sermon is over, you won't want to either. Is it because I'm opposed to any of these principles or sources? Far from it. I let the principles guide my life and my actions. But the times are changing. Our faith is changing. And pretty soon, these bookmarks could be nothing more than a relic from days gone by, back in the day when we only had 7 principles. How did we come to have 7 principles anyway? One thing we know for sure, they weren't handed to us from on high or carved on tablets of stone. They were developed democratically, which is to say, the hard way. But after what we've seen in our American democracy this year, I don't need to tell you how hard it is to do things democratically. Originally, at the time of the merger of Unitarianism and Universalism in 1961, there were only 6 principles, and they were, shall we say, very manly. The words man and mankind appeared repeatedly in the principles. Naturally, this didn't sit well with many women in our movement. So in the 1980s, there came a push to reform the language of our principles to reflect our commitment to equality among genders. As we were working toward this reform, UUs also began to become more aware of the environmental crisis that was just dawning in our collective consciousness. The Reverend Ken Collier relates the story of what happened at the 1984 General Assembly as the final draft of a new statement of principles and purposes was being debated. Unitarian Universalists went through a study process for 4 years that culminated at the 1984 General Assembly with the proposal for a new statement of principles. The proposal contained versions of each of the first 6 principles, but it did not directly mention interdependence. The concept was, perhaps, implicit in a number of other principles, especially the first, concerning the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But even that one did not extend to non-humans. Many of us thought that there was something important missing, and some of us were prepared to vote against the proposal unless it got changed. As the debate wore on and patience grew thin, the Reverend Paul LaRue stood up and proposed this 7th principle. Some word crafting ensued, but because almost everyone agreed with it in substance, it passed with few, if any, dissenting votes. A funny thing has happened since then. We appeal to these principles for all sorts of things, from supporting social action projects to theological projects and beyond. Of all 7, it is this last principle that is appealed to by far the most often. Unlike many religions or social movements, Unitarian Universalism holds forth the truth that, in the words of Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams, revelation is not sealed, meaning that we understand ours to be a living, dynamic faith that adapts and expands when confronted with changing times. As our understanding of what justice looks like changes, we too change. Ours is not a faith stuck in the past, nor one that presses unreflectively toward the future, but one that builds on what we've learned, integrating new information, preserving the past without idolizing it. Now, our movement is facing another such moment, when the values we claim are in tension with the great issues of justice in our world, and we are being invited to consider whether we might enlarge the scope of our tradition. People all across the country who embrace liberal faiths and values like ours are moved to lamentation by the deep wounds of racism that never seem to heal, the immense trauma inflicted on our siblings of color daily, the violence, both overt and covert, that reinforces the segregation that divides and destroys us and keeps racial equity always out of our reach. In these times, we are learning about the real history of our country. We are learning how everything we see, everything around us, is tainted by racism. Many of the lessons we learned in school have turned out to be lies, and much of the real history of the events of our nation has been buried and hidden from us. Racism is present in all strata of society, from the halls of power to our friends and neighbors. At the same time, UUs, both lifelong and newcomer, grieve that there aren't more people of color in our pews. And our denomination has learned and documented the difficulties that face religious professionals of color in our churches who encounter racist attitudes and policies much more often than white UUs believed possible. Those of us who are invested in this faith are bewildered. How does this keep happening? And what can we do about it? My colleague, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, has written the history of Black Unitarian Universalists in North America. Let me tell you what I mean when I say he has written their history. A couple of years ago at General Assembly, I heard Mark talk about the earliest days of his scholarship when he was a graduate student at Meadville Lombard Theological School. He had decided to write his senior thesis on the topic of African Americans in our faith. He soon came to realize that the entire existing corpus of literature on this topic was 4 sentences in one book. He says that he cried through his whole thesis. These days, not only do we have Mark's wonderful books about the African American experience in Unitarian Universalism, we also have the Sankofa collection at Meadville Lombard, a collection of the writings of UUs of color which is constantly being expanded and digitized. The collection is named after the Sankofa bird, a legendary animal from the folkways of Ghana. The bird has a long neck that reaches back behind it, picking up a sacred egg off its back. The word Sankofa means go back and get it, and is found in a West African proverb that says, "It is not wrong to go back and get that which is in danger of being lost." Today, West Africans and their diaspora around the world look to the Sankofa bird as a symbol of preserving the past in order to create a positive future. Reed and activists like the organizers of Black Lives of UU inhabit the spirit of the Sankofa bird by going back to get that which is in danger of being lost, the history of Unitarians and Universalists of color who have always been present in our tradition. As an adjudicator for the UU Seminarian History Prize last spring, I read with great interest papers by seminarians who had uncovered stories of Korean American Unitarians in California, Black UUs in Boston, and more. These stories are gems of rare worth in our tradition and expose the falsehood that Unitarian Universalism is a white church tradition. Learning from the past means being truthful about the harm done within congregations and within the histories of Unitarianism and Universalism. It means getting real about American Unitarians who were slaveholders, like Thomas Jefferson, and about Universalists in the South who supported slavery and the Confederacy. It means acknowledging that people like Clarence Skinner, a famous Universalist minister, and Margaret Sanger, a Unitarian and the founder of Planned Parenthood, both supported eugenics in their day. It means facing the truth that time after time, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America refused to ordain African Americans and often pulled promised funding from church programs that supported them, rather than keep their promises and make tough choices about financial stability. These are things that we don't like to talk about. We might be afraid that people won't want to be Unitarian Universalists now if they knew what skeletons were hiding in our closets. But I'm here to tell you, there is no institution in the United States that has been historically dominated by white people that doesn't have these kinds of skeletons in the closet. Every church, every nonprofit, every government body, racism is the water we swim in, have swam in for hundreds of years, and pretending that we are immune to it is unfair and disingenuous. My hunch is that in the future, it is only those institutions who are honest about racism in their histories who are going to survive in the long run. Only those who can get real about racism and take responsibility for doing something about it will be around to see new generations of faithful followers. We have an opportunity to do that now. UUs of color within our movement have proposed an 8th principle, which reads as follows. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. This proposal has not come before the General Assembly of our association yet. Right now, we're just in a study period, just as the association was back in 1984. Yet some congregations are already adopting the 8th principle for themselves. They don't want to wait on this. They want to see change now and to hold themselves accountable for it now. We can do the same thing. This year, I'm proposing that our congregation undertake the study of the 8th principle and adopt it as part of our own covenant with one another. We'll study it together in 2 study sessions for adults, and our religious education students will also have an opportunity to consider it. Then, if the study sessions move us to act, we can look for this motion on the agenda for our congregational meeting in May. We will send a message to our association and to our sibling congregations across the country that the time to act against racism is now. What can you as individuals do to support the 8th Principle Project? Here are some ideas. First, Decide for yourself that as of right now, you adhere to 8 principles, not 7. It does mean you'll have to stop handing out the rainbow bookmark, at least until we can come up with something new. But you can live by this principle right now in your own life. Second, live in the multicultural now. Recognize that there are a lot of people of color in our congregation now, and that means that First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City is not a white congregation. Make up your mind to never use that phrase again in reference to our church. We are a multicultural church right now. So how does that change the way you think about our church and the kinds of things we promise each other and plan to do together? How can we support UUs of color in our own congregation? Third, you can support UUs of color across our movement by learning about their work and supporting them financially. You can read books, such as those by Professor Morrison Reed, and learn about the history of UUs of color. You can support movements for people of color in our Salt Lake community and show up proudly as a Unitarian Universalist whose statement of our core values, our 8 principles, puts anti-racism at the center of everything we do. This is our calling in this moment. This is our future as a faith. This is who we are, who we're meant to be, who we choose to be, as revelation is unsealed and we grow into the fullness of our potential. May we, like the Sankofa bird, bring our past into the future as we create a new vision of ourselves and our world. Amen. My friends, thank you so much for joining us again this week. Our closing words today are by J.R.R. Tolkien. It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. Amen.